The things which excites a CTO is way different from what excites, let's say, a software developer at a different level. Like for sure, all my software SD1s and interns are looking forward for cool HackerRank t-shirts, and that is what excites them. Versus a CTO is like my level is like where the business is going and new products and ideas.
Hari and Subbu, thanks for being on the podcast. And we're obviously, we're never really interviewed two developers or two CTOs before. So this is going to be rather interesting, where I'm hoping Ajay and I don't end up doing most of the talking.
But I just have so many questions, which is fine. I guess we'll get into all of it.
Yeah. And I'm so glad we're doing this on a Friday. So thank you for carving out the time. Hari, you're in Bangalore, and Subbu, you're right now in Bombay, no?
Yep.
Okay, sweet. Anyway, I guess the point of the podcast today was we have a massive, we've been looking to hire folks on the tech space, and I just feel like we have this podcast, which is, can we break everything down into frameworks? And I think a lot of non-tech folks really struggle to find techies, right? In this market today, you have tools, you have friends that you can leverage, and then but essentially I feel like hiring a developer, hiring a tech team is maybe the most important team that you'll hire, especially if you're building a product. So I thought it would be cool to kind of get the two of you, get your insights, and if you can break a lot of them down into frameworks, especially on the stages side of things, right? If you're starting off to something like, you're a 10-person team or a 15-person team. So I think we'll ask a lot of questions at the ground level, and then we'll kind of move to the 20,000 foot. But Ajay, I felt like
just to add context to that, I feel the reason I'm excited to have this conversation is I just feel there is such a disconnect between the tech community and everyone else, right? Like founders, people who are starting up. And I think there's this huge learning curve that has to happen through any tech, non-tech person coming together, where there's you have to figure out both worlds. And somehow through this conversation, if we can just shed some light on both sides to just see how maybe a non-tech person can understand the tech world better, how to frame your questions better, how to understand your requirements better. Any of that, I think there'll truly be value there, because otherwise it just seems like a black box to a lot of us, I feel.
Right.
I think for a lot of tech people, it's the
other way, exactly.
It's the same crib that designers have, right? Hey, that company is building something. Can you build me this? That's usually the first place where you need to talk and figure out what you need, rather than saying, "Hey, someone's built it. Can you build it?"
Yeah, I think
can you build the same thing for me?
For designers, I think they're always saying that people tell them, "Oh, this is so simple," and I think that's their biggest pet peeve. I think similar for developers.
Yeah. So Ari and Subbu, both of you start companies. You've been in the space for a lot of time. As old as the current Gen Alpha, which is supposed to be 2000 beyond, right? Or 2020 and beyond. I think Gen Z is 2000 beyond. But how did the two of you kind of start Primaseller? Hari, obviously start HackerRank. How did you kind of go about finding your co-founders from a tech standpoint, and then kind of how did you scale your tech team? I think we're quite curious with that.
Sure. So, I don't know if even I would take the same thing. Like every startup starts with two founders back in college days, and so me and Vivek, we went to same university in NIT Trichy, and together we were doing bunch of projects together. We would teach our juniors and teach them programming, web development, and Linux and some of the cool things at that time. And I don't think we ever had this thing of starting a company, or starting a company was, I don't think we knew the word entrepreneurship and so on. It's called building projects. That's the scale, and you want to build projects which is useful for your friends in college. So we built a bunch of things. In fact, we actually we used to call it Code Labs, where we built a mini version of HackerRank in college. where
Nice.
we wanted the juniors to come and learn programming, get better at competitive programming. I also built some of the other things was like, building an SMS service. And at that time, now it's infinite, but at that time, services used to give some 100 SMSs free per day and whatnot. And you could send a message saying, send me cricket score, or you would get the score. And the coolest feature I liked was if you bunk a class, you could say, I bunked this class. And after a month, it will give you the total of where you are and which ones you need to attend and which ones you should not attend and so on, so that it keeps a track of your attendance. So we built these services, which were pretty exciting during college days.
Hari, that might have been the most valuable in comparison to the
100%. I built it
Yeah.
for myself. built it for myself, obviously. So from there, and then and Vivek was the college's this training and placement representative. So he and what used to happen is these companies used to come with printed question and answer papers and multiple choice and the OCR papers and whatnot. So the coding questions is actually evaluated by the tech company folks, but Vivek was asked to correct all the multiple choice questions. And one of the interviews, one of the companies, I got selected. And what the companies used to do is they used to finish the whole process in a day. Like there is this concept of day 0, day 1, and you need to wrap up the whole thing. So my interview started at 11 p.m. and I was obviously not even ready for that. So on the other end, super sleepy, went to the interview, completely screwed the interview, didn't work at all. And this is when we had the system where we were using this automated code checker and other things to teach our juniors. So we connected both of these together to see, could we use this for recruitment? And even before that, for a year, we did a mock interview platform, and that's why we're Interview Street, and then built this platform. So it naturally evolved with the idea of building different interesting products, something which is useful for others, and one of it worked, and now I'd say we are married to the current idea for about 10 plus years, and this is the core thing we're working on.
Nice. And how long was it just the two of you?
It's about first 2.5 years, and then we added one intern who's a college junior, and so on, slowly with hiring from our college friends, and then hired a college senior, which was a big moment. That's when we realized, oh, we are really a company, because still you hire. You're like, okay, it's fine. And then when we had to do the first paycheck, like, yes, we are a company now. We can't. It's not a project anymore.
We can't quit now. You got your first paycheck. But tell me this: you and both of you coded, or was it just you primarily coding and Vivek doing a lot of the partnerships and selling?
Both of us used to code, but there was a primary coder. Like I get to take most of the tech decisions, and Vivek would go by that. Even in the programming language, I'm a PHP developer. He was a Java developer coming from Amazon. So I was like, who was going to code forever? It was me. So it goes with mine. And he used to build a lot of product mockups, and of course, travel and meet customers and whole lot. So whatever time he got, he would build some features, or if there is something where I'm not delivering on time, he would try to code, and then he would complain so much and make me code at the end of the day. So that's how it works.
Nice. And so you also met Al in college, no?
Yeah, so Al was my senior in college. So Al was toying around with the idea of Primaseller before we both of us went into it full time. So Al had gotten, I think, the first version of what was Primaseller was written by some outsourced vendor, and then when we figured out that there was some business that could be built around it, and when we went full time is when I literally for the first time probably saw that code, and I was like, dude, I don't think this is going to work, right? So it was a bunch of interns who used to maintain that code, and it was all in .NET, right? So I don't know, Hari would probably be able to identify. It was probably about 15 files with, I don't know, 10,000 lines of code each, right? So like basically a big pile of tangled mess. But the interesting part was that it worked reasonably well, right? So I used to keep saying that, hey, that's one data point that proves that God exists, right? So it was that. And I think one of the first order of business when I went full time was to get hold of another friend. So I conned him into joining Primaseller and writing code. So the first thing we did was we said, hey, this is not going to work. So we said, let's rewrite. Right now, every time now, I mean, 7-8 years hence, when I use the word rewrite, it brings back nightmares, right? Because rewriting is always a terrible idea. You never rewrite stuff. But again, I was a lot stupider than I am today. So we said, hey, let's rewrite. And we rewrote the whole thing in Java. It took, as expected, 3x longer than we estimated. But eventually we got the whole thing working, right? And once it was in a language that was sort of manageable, understood by, and by then we also sort of hired 2 or 3 developers. We taught all these interns Java. So essentially, it was in a state where it was still not the greatest piece of code, but it was at least a recognizable bunch of mess rather than an unrecognizable bunch of mess, right? And then after that, we went through multiple iterations. Each time we sort of, I tried my best to avoid rewriting. It was mostly trying to rebuild a car while it was moving, right? So you were taking off one wheel, putting another wheel over there, and then halfway through you realize, oh, okay, I need to change the steering wheel, and then someone's driving, but you take the steering wheel off and you just hope that for the next 15 minutes you don't have to turn, and then you quickly fix another steering wheel. But eventually it got to that place where things made sense, right? And you had that framework, the base of it built, and then it was just sort of putting pieces on top, right? One thing I think which probably every sort of tech-heavy startup would say is that there has to be 1 or 2 people who understand the entire evolution of that product from day zero, right? And they are the ones who sort of, when shit hits the fan, they are the ones who will come and say, hey, no, this is how it's got to be fixed because we took these decisions, 6 years ago. Which is how it is. But I mean, in retrospect, I feel like as programmers, as developers, we need to do a better job of documenting all that so that you increase the buzz factor of the product by from 1 to something larger than 1.
Tell me this.
So that was pretty much.
No, go ahead. Finish.
No, that's it. I said that's pretty much. I mean, that's the standard template story of every tech product, or at least every SaaS product that you read about on the internet.
Right. I know we're going to get into hiring and or a co-founder, getting into a tech co-founder. But even before we get into that, you mentioned the word, I think you said tech-heavy product. Where would you draw that line? Because I feel for someone who's not a native coder, not a developer, I look at a product and I'm like, oh, this is not such a tech-heavy product. This is, sure, it's got a UI aspect to it. There's a front end, but it seems relatively straightforward. And then you speak to a developer and they're like, no, there's so much intricacy that goes into it. This is not an easy product to build. Where would you draw that line to say this is a tech-heavy product versus, sure, this is a tech product, but any run-of-the-mill coder can code this?
Well, to be fair, I think every product can be written by any run-of-the-mill coder, but the fact of the matter is that your mileage will vary, right? So depending on how run-of-the-mill that effort is, it will work for 1 user, 10 users, 100 users, 1,000 users. When you hit that scale that you want to is when things will start breaking, right? So I know tech-heavy is a sort of a loaded term. There is no metric that says that, hey, this is a tech-heavy product versus this is not a tech-heavy product. But I'd say anything that has a bunch of automation in it is likely going to be a tech-heavy product. If you want things to happen in the background, that is likely going to be tech heavy. Right? I know it's a very gross sort of paintbrush to paint it with, but it is. I mean, games are not necessarily background, but they are tech heavy products, right? So I guess if it's on the internet, there is a very good chance it's going to be tech heavy.
Right.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, like Subbu mentioned, it's probably the scale and the flexibility with which you build it. So one is, if you are building it for 10 users, doesn't have to be tech heavy, 4 files, 1,000 lines of code solves it. And the 10 user product suddenly becomes successful and you don't get enough time to fix it. So you have to, like the way you mentioned, you have to change the car while you are driving it. You don't get an option to stop it, wait for 2 months and redo everything. So that's the scale part. Another one is, as much as we want to start at an empty, like a scratch product all the time, but we are always making changes to an existing product, an existing system, and improving it. So have you built it in such a way so that improvements takes 1x time or 10x time? So, and that's where, again, you've added right amount of hooks for these changes to happen in the future. So when some things change, you don't take all the time in the world. So that's where it gets tech heavy. Like chat is a very simple product, but WhatsApp is super tech heavy and at the scale and at the kind of features they have. So it's once you hit product market fit, you are seeing it becoming tech heavy very, very soon. Like it's before that, or while at the project stage is where, like, okay, there were times when the site used to be down and like, okay, I'll fix it next day. Like there is nobody on the site anyway. And now if it goes down for 2 minutes, I'm like, oh shit, this is bad, and I get the heart attack at that point. So that is where it's the same product. It's the scale and how fast you want to change makes it tech heavy there.
So if that's the case, let's say we're starting off, we have an idea. We assume there's obviously going to be some tech play moving forward. At what stage do you bring someone to, let's say, who can handle that scale? Like if I want to get someone like a Subbu or Hari get involved, do I come to you and say, listen, I have this grand idea and this is what we want to do. This is what the wireframes look like. Would you be interested? Or is it like, hey, get us involved when the complexity really kicks in and you can do this with, let's say, some junior developers, but I can help you with the framework. I can help you with, let's say, hiring. Like what stage should founders, non-tech founders, start looking at CTOs, I think?
It's a hard question to answer. I mean, I think honestly, it depends, right? Let's say if you were building, let's say, something complex like an ERP, right? You would probably want a tech co-founder very early on, right? Versus, let's say, if you were trying to build, I don't know, maybe an in-product user feedback poll collection tool, maybe you could defer that decision to go find a co-founder, to a little later, right? When it becomes like, hey, this is a scalable business model, there is money to be made out of it, right? So I'd say if you're building a tool, a feature or a small tool, maybe you can defer. But if you're building a system of sorts that you want to go and sell, probably a better idea to get someone as a co-founder early on.
Yeah, and there's always a lot of, this question has a lot of hindsight bias. Like you would, if it works out, then that's the right path to take. People have done this with no code tools and no tech at the start, and if it's successful, yes, this is a good, how amazing that path is. And there are many startups where even the co-founders and early hires were engineers. If it's successful, you would target, this is the reason. I think it should not be that hard to hire one. It doesn't have to be a CTO. One person who could guide on the right decisions. And you don't have to take all those right decisions. You would take a wrong decision knowing it is a wrong. Like you are taking this technical debt because you want to move fast.
Yep.
And this is a debt you are taking. And when you don't know, and if it's a blind spot is when it just gets messy. And there are so many times where we take shortcuts, knowing it's a shortcut, you got to pay it back later, and you would pay it back when the right time comes. And the right time is after product market fit, like, and so on. So someone who could take that call could be a lead engineer, could be the CTO, and at an early stage, I don't know what's the difference between a lead engineer and CTO, because you're the one who's coding all of that stuff and taking those decisions. So that's, I think, how I would frame that. It's as long as you have that, it could be even in the form of an advisor or a mentor who could look at your architecture and spend some time and give you those advising. Especially now with the cloud, the scale is just, do you have more money to spend? You could launch more servers and you get more scale to till some point, and then you feel like, okay, there is a ceiling, I can't go further. So, and if the product market fit happens, you also have more money to spend. Like, cloud cost is not the biggest problem at that point in time. So there are ways you could just avoid that at the early stage and still launch something, show value to your customers, and make that happen. In our case, like, both of us were, techies, both of us had computer science background, so I didn't have to go through that. So I don't know how exactly that path works.
Right. What are your views on no? I know you mentioned it, so which is why. What's your view on no code tools in general? Are they hyped too much? Because I've tried to use no code tools, and I feel there are limitations at every corner. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on
even I've tried, and it doesn't fully work, or there is always something, or maybe it's because I'm the developer, I don't fully understand it. Like, I feel like, oh, I could build this as well, and if there is any bottleneck with it, or do I have to align myself with a different mindset to use the no code tools? It works till some point. Like, it for sure works till some point where you could build a basic application and do some activities with that. Like, it don't have to be at zero stage or hiring external folks or internal developers. But for me, the minute when I hit that some part not working, the developer kicks in saying, oh, I could build this on this own and throw this away. That I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. That's one of the reasons I've never used it.
Yeah, I agree with Hari. Every time I've tried using a no-code or a low-code tool, I get stuck, and I realize that, hey, probably because that person hasn't written this feature into it, and then it feels like a big letdown, because then my developer brain kicks in and says, "Oh, I have to write code anyway," and then you feel bad saying that, "Hey, you started the story saying it's going to be no-code/no-code, and hey." 3 days later, here I'm writing code again. Why couldn't I have started writing code earlier, right? I guess it comes from being a developer, not particularly the fault of the no-code or the low-code tool. Probably the way my brain works. Right?
Yeah, I think this is how I feel about analytics tools as well. Most of the time, like, it gives you some output, and I'm like, this is very rudimentary analysis. I could put this in a sheet and probably get out a lot more from it. So I think it's that same perspective.
I think I agree on that. You can run certain sort of businesses for a reasonable amount of time on Excel sheets, right? As stupid as 100%. It might sound, email, phone, WhatsApp, and plus an Excel sheet can get you a long way in certain sort of businesses.
So true.
It's a highly underrated framework
I fully agree.
for building a business.
Yep. It's funny about no code. I can tell you as a non-coder, I've maybe I'll build something out using no code, or like trying to find a freelancer who can build something on no code. But I feel like I still get stuck into, hey, if we had to scale this, man, we still need a developer. So is there then why even go through that process? I've
not found the utility of a no code platform. Like, where is that sweet spot where just me, as someone who knows very, very, very little code, and plus a no-code tool gives me what I want? I haven't found that that product market fit, if you want to call it. Like, what am I using it for? Like, I feel anything a little complex you need someone who can actually write code.
Right. Anyway, I think coming back to, I guess, what we were talking about in terms of just, hiring around the startup stage, right? So tell me, I mean, the two of you, I mean, I say it's amazing. It's highly rare to find, first of all, friends that you end up working with, have a good relationship, and you build something, right? And for a long period of time. I think that's crazy. So, and I think a lot of non-techies are trying to, or let's call them non-tech founders, are trying to find this CTO-like folks. How do we find you? What's the way, right? Like, in your 30s, I've just moved away from my network completely. I have like 4 friends, 4 co-friends, and some ancillary friends, right? So where are you guys hiding?
And I feel this is a common problem because I feel a lot of friends who are trying to start tech-enabled companies are like, man, I can't find a CTO. I can't find a tech person who I can partner with for the long term. Like, you can find dev shops and stuff, but yeah, more a partner, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the things is, first is if you're trying to find a CTO, the business problem is what excites them more than the tech. And most of the CTO tech is just an enabler. Like you could swap the languages and still at the end user experience, does it matter or not? How does it work? Is the core thing. So it's at least for a CTO hire, it's probably the problem statement, the domain they want to work in, and the things which excites a CTO is way different from what excites, let's say, a software developer at a different level. Like for sure, all my software SD1s and interns are looking forward for cool HackerRank t-shirts, and that is what excites them. Versus a CTO is like, my level is like where the business is going and new products and ideas. So it's funny how like my conversation with Vivek is like new product idea, and then with the interns it'd be like new t-shirt ideas, and the level at which it changes.
Yeah.
So
Maybe
yeah.
I was going to say, maybe you're over the whole t-shirt thing because you have like 20 t-shirts or 30.
At this point, yeah, every iteration.
Yeah. And the place to find, I've seen things work out in most of the startup events, tech talks, and where you could go and find and you meet people. Not really to hire a CTO, just to share your idea and spread the idea and see where you find the people with the right synergy. Like it's you need people who are, no matter how good or bad the idea is, people who are equally excited about that idea and or jumping with same level of madness and so on. Like it's funny how we start the idea we started with was mock interviews, and we thought that's the next $1 billion idea. Like now it looks stupid. It's like, what were we thinking? But the energy level on with both of us on that idea was great, and then tech kept on changing, and then we hired good developers who changed the tech than what I built in, and now they own the tech. So it's so as much as the CTO as the tech in the T, it's more than that. It's connecting the business and tech. So anyone who has that right blend of this is what we need to do for business, anyone who's constantly trying to keep the tech low, not overcomplicate things and still push the business fast, they're the right set of folks you can identify. It doesn't need a tech round as such. It needs more on a software developer with the business mindset.
Yeah, I think CTOs need not necessarily be the best programmer or the smartest programmer, or the most knowledgeable. They know 15 different programming languages and 20 different databases. Probably not. I think what is super critical, like Hari pointed out, is a CTO needs to be someone who is really good at building hack on top of hack at the right time, right? And get that product market fit as soon as possible. The real tech, if you get that product market fit, you're going to have the money to hire actual experts to do that. And that is where a CTO really starts sort of doing their role. Is not to really write tech, but is to find other people who can write 20x better tech than they could have ever written. Right? So that's probably where it is. But yes, they need to be hands-on. They need to have been hands-on at some point of time in their life. And to your point of how do you meet such guys, it's hard because we are most of the time sitting in front of a laptop in some corner we are not at those events for the most part, right? Unless there is probably free alcohol, right? So it's kind of hard to find the tech guys at these events. At least whenever I have gone, and those are few and far apart, I rarely find tech guys, right? And I used to feel bored at some point of time, and I would actually go sit in a corner somewhere at that event, open my laptop, and start writing code. So maybe
that's
if you're
your
in an
key
event and you
thing.
see someone sitting in the corner
Yeah.
for an hour,
Yeah, look for the guy in the corner.
Yeah, look for the guy in the corner writing code. He could be your next CTO or your co-founder.
That's funny. Something I wanted to ask was, so you mentioned in terms of like, to attract a CTO, like it's the business problem, it's the massive problem that you want to solve, right? Let's say you have convinced this individual, right? Maybe it's a friend, it's like, you go a long way back, all of that, and you have the CTO. How do you convince that first lead engineer or developer, especially given today it's a lot harder to convince them, right? Like so many more opportunities. But what was your pitch back in the day, and then what would be your pitch today if you're just starting off, I guess?
It's a question, or rather, my pitch to hire engineers has evolved depending on where we were in our journey, right? But I think one thing that is sort of stuck, though it might seem counterintuitive, is when you're pitching that job of your lead engineer or your first or your second or your early team of developers, it's probably okay to be vulnerable at that point of time, right? And what I mean by vulnerable is saying that, hey, I'm super excited about this idea. I think this is what the tech might be, but I'm probably wrong. And I'm looking for people who can come and tell me that, no, you're wrong. This is how it has to be, right? The ones who aren't super passionate about getting on that journey, sitting in a room, putting your heads together and trying to figure out an answer, they're probably going to just think that, hey, man, this guy has no clue of what he's doing. And they will they'll probably not convert, they will not join, right? And in retrospect, I feel like every time that has happened, I feel like I've dodged bullets, right? The ones that I was super frank and candid and open with about, hey, I'm excited. I know there is something, but this is super hard, and I need people to help me figure it out. And those guys came and joined, regardless of my vagueness and the fact that I was probably not paying top dollar, right? They were actually the guys who stuck around, right? They stuck around for the longest time, and I think probably the ones that even moved out, they moved out because of family reasons, right? Not because they wanted to leave, right? And I wasn't smart enough at that time to figure out how to make remote work, right? Remote programming work, right? I sort of beat myself up sometimes that, hey, I should have thought about it, made it easier for them to work remotely. But yeah, I guess that's one thing that I've sort of realized is that if you're honest about how hard that problem is and that you are probably not sure of it 100%, and those guys come and join you, you've actually sort of found the right people to join you on your journey.
Yeah. One of the things which probably has evolved is how startups is now a common thing. In fact, I remember when we had to hire our first intern, my co-founder Vivek had to meet their parents and prove to them that this is a company. Like, it's not just, we are not making this up. This is still a company, and we will pay your son. It's fine. The company will grow, and explain the whole concept of what a 2-member company is, and this is the first developer and how this can grow up to. And as we were explaining to them, even we found it hard to explain. It's not like I'm joining the startup, I'm starting a startup, right? You need approvals from your family, relatives, friends at so many levels. So one thing which has gotten easier is at that time we had to tell that this company exists and we are not some fraud, or we are not imagining things in your mind. So that certainly has changed a lot. But that time, and we have gone with hiring, especially from college, the friends circle, your seniors and juniors badge. That's how it sort of gets into hiring mode. The other part, which worked well for us, and some of engineers who joined us that time still point out, is how fast we were in responding to them. Like Vivek would respond within like matter of 5 minutes when you send a resume, like let's talk and so on. That speed made some of those early engineers choose us than the usual process which other companies were taking. So this is one thing which in hindsight we realized, oh, we should do that, and we still try to make sure that works. And because the early engineers joined us for that same reason, and they joined us, and it's like, you're the only person who responded within a matter of 2 minutes and your title said CEO. So I thought this is a good company to join. So I think those things are ways to try to attract. Usually it's easier to get the junior talent. If you want to get experienced folks, needs a lot more convincing. You should have known the person for maybe a few years, and that works. But getting in software ST1 or lower, like an intern, even a developer with a couple of years experience, today I think it's a lot more easier than what it was for a startup.
Yeah, t-shirts for the win.
Yeah, I think to add to what Hari just said, I think for 7-8 years ago, parents would come and ask, "Oh, you didn't get MNC company.
Yes.
You didn't get big name brand." Now I think that sort of conversation is saying that, "Oh, you didn't get a startup. You're at an MNC."
Yeah.
So I think that's something that's changed. But I think what the one perception that is still sort of needs some work is that startups need not necessarily, and most of the cases cannot pay like a big MNC, right? Somehow that narrative is still, for the largest part, something that people with fresh out of college or 1 or 2 years experience have still not sort of figured it out, right? They don't realize that the startup culture is not going out for drinks on Friday. The startup culture is it's basically slogging it out through Friday, and then probably on Saturday morning after a night out, go out for breakfast. That's probably closer to what a real hustling startup does.
Right. So tell me, okay, so in terms of the intern and like your first hires, were they mostly, you went through, I'm assuming, through your personal network and through your alumni, right? But how does that change as you scale? Like what channels become active? Obviously, Hari, you built out a massive, I mean, at HackerRank, you guys have built out a massive developer community itself. So curious, like, is there more weightage now on like open-ended hiring, or is there still, hey, let's do referrals, or hey, we built this kind of solid developer team already, which are, I don't know, maybe it's 60 people, 70 people, but like they are still getting their network in to expand your engineering team. What's been the breakdown as such today?
I think one of the, and again, we didn't initially realize this. One of the things which worked in our favor was every customer we use or we got were using HackerRank, and then that means more developers are getting to know about HackerRank. So that made the process a little bit easier on what you are doing. And you could even ask them saying, what is a feature you would want to build? Like, oh, you took this assessment for this particular company. What would you build and what would you improve? And you can talk about that. So being a developer product really helped a lot in getting the brand out. But in terms of people where we filter and where we used to evaluate them, the benchmark we used to look for is what makes them unique. Especially, I've seen that in college. There is a set of folks who have done all these extra stuff, like I used to do the intern hiring, and this is so. I used to get this thousands and thousands of resume, and I used to go through them manually and then talk to them for 10 minutes. At some point, I got so well versed that I could generate a generic candidate's resume for this particular college. Like if it's Triple IT Hyderabad, there is some Wikipedia parser, there is systems, there is networks, and so on. And then if you take another college, they have done their whole bunch of stuff. And in between, there was every college had some one machine learning course. And then every resume had machine learning added to it, and so on. And my filter just became what makes your profile different, like what makes it unique. I know your college, everyone does these 5 projects. Let's scratch it out. Tell me, what did you do in 4 years, right? Like, and then they talk about different things. People have done a bunch of things in competitive programming. They have done open source. They've tried their own startups. They've tried their own projects. And then we go deep dive into why did you do this? Did you treat your mom and family as customers? Got the feedback? Did the whole software development life cycle and whatnot? So this, we started doing it at junior level and then expanded it even when we were hiring senior developers. So we did get that good branding because a lot of tech companies were using our product, and that gave the credibility. And that's what made us even build the community of developers. Like, people want to learn, but our hiring bar has always been like seeing what makes them unique and what makes them different than everyone in the same peer group. And that set the early culture. Like, especially the initial 5 to 10 hires are very, very critical, because at some point they are going to hire people, and people they hire are going to hire people. So we had that bar early on by just using this as a thing.
Very interesting. Does that, and Supu, maybe you could also add to this, did they mention that is that something that comes out of digging, or is it like, hey, that's straight up in the resume? I mean, like, and I think the follow-up question to that is like, are resumes even being used today, or is that completely changing at the entry level?
I don't know, because at least, okay, in my last job after the acquisition, I was sort of hiring across levels, right? At the junior levels, I stopped screening resumes, right? Because after a certain point of time, I realized that, like Hari said, there is sort of a template that you realize there is this pattern that you start seeing in developers, right? You want a front-end developer, you know that you need these 5 keywords. You need these 8 keywords for a backend developer. Somebody for data engineering, you need these keywords. I think we had gotten to that stage where I remember at one point of time we had actually compiled a list of icebreaker sort of questions for the recruiting team to ask them, which was like, hey, what do you think is the right way to deploy a certain piece of code, right? And we had given them like answers saying that, hey, if they said use AWS Lambda, or if they said no, spin up a VM or something, and then see. And the recruiters used to say that, hey, but we don't understand. We said, no, you don't need to understand. You just need to ask the question, see what answers they give, and then depending on that, just note down those answers, and then we'll tell you whether we need to call them in for an interview or not, right? So at the entry level, I don't know, because honestly, up to that, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years, most resumes look the same. And to Hari's point, yes, I'm looking for something ridiculously that stands out from the rest, right? Open source being a great example, right? So I've in my experience, people who actually sort of contributed even probably maybe 2 or 3 pull requests to a fairly popular product or a project, the quality of conversation when you do an interview is way better than what you would if it's normal, right? You don't have to explain a lot of basic things. They make the right sort of assumptions, and they will tell you up front that these are the assumptions that I'm making while solving a problem, right? With Primaseller, unfortunately, we didn't have the benefit of actually, our audience was never programmers or anybody even tech, right? it was a product meant to digitize a largely non-digital
Right.
space, right? Which was retail. And finding my next developer used to always be a nightmare, right? Which was essentially go list it on every damn platform that I could find, Angel List and whatnot. I don't even now remember the names, right? I used to have a list, and I used to just I had a little script that I would use to template job descriptions out, and then just go sort of copy paste it everywhere. But it was hard, right? So, and I knew that this was going to be a challenge for me going forward till I hit that certain sort of scale where that, Primaseller as a brand became recognizable. Right? So I consciously sort of steered the tech in a way where it was not very developer intensive, right? And what I mean by not developer intensive is I would try to automate stuff sooner than later, right? So my thought was always that, hey, can I run this with 3 developers instead of 4 or 5 developers, right? So that was one thing that I did. It was helpful. It was super useful at one point of time when I think just after COVID, we were down to like Ali and me were like sitting in a room, and like that was Primaseller for a brief period of time. That really helped because I could run the entire product by myself, right? I didn't really need developers to maintain Primaseller as such, right? I needed developers to sort of add. So that's one way that I think, depending on the industry that you're in and how easy or hard you find hiring to be, is hey, try to build a low maintenance product, right? And technology is getting better today, right? The way the first version of Primaseller was written versus what we actually went and sold was very different, right? The level of automation, the level of self-healing, deployment, and all was like way different.
Yeah.
When you're hiring, and you had something?
No, finish.
When you guys are hiring a developer, I've heard very varying answers to this question, and I guess what I wanted to ask was how much do you value skills outside of like the core developer coding skills? I've found like CTOs and founders say if this guy can code and just about communicate what he's coding to everyone else in the development team and everyone else he's working with, that more than meets the bar. And I've heard other people saying that this guy needs to fit into the company, culture, fit, communication, all that other stuff. And I think this comes with I feel generally there's a huge supply side shortage of developers, and there's a lot of leverage that developers have. So I think the bar is also set by that.
Yeah, maybe the bunch of things you said. So one is obviously the technical skills. I'm assuming that's taken care and that's top notch. And then as you look into and as the company scales and you have more and more developers, there are some things which you can get away with. So for example, the culture fit and what we call value fit and whether this is the right fit for the team, that always wins because you don't want someone to come in and disrupt the existing team. So whatever size you're at, it's a must-have. But the trickiest one is the communication, and at some stage, especially some of our early developers, they did go to customers and meet and demo the whole product. So when me and Vivek, when we used to demo, I'm the tech person, and Vivek used to be the salesperson. Then he moved to US, so I became the salesperson, and I had another tech person. Even though I'm the CTO, I would do the sales pitch, and then there is one person from the engineering. So those folks would still meet customer-facing teams. And now we have teams where you're mostly within the tech, like you're building the front end and you're changing it from one architecture to another. So your communication bar should be at a level where you're able to talk to your peers. Like it's not at a stage where people don't even understand the architecture you're trying to come up with, or you don't even communicate with them and just go ahead and make a bunch of changes. So things change and evolve based on which kind of persona you're going to face. There are some where, and again, it's like, oh, there is a red flag on communication, there is a red flag on this, there is a red flag on that. How many red flags can I accommodate to before I go ahead and say? The saying is like, when there is a when there is a doubt, like there's no doubt. Like you should not. It's better not to hire. I've taken that approach multiple times as well, because once you hire, like that rec is closed. You need that person to deliver. It's so much better to have the rec open and you get in the right person. So there are once one or two attributes you can live like without those at a certain stage of the company. If it's a first 4 or 5 developers, then you may need most of it, or they have to show the skills or the attitude to pick those up. Like, because you're also learning building a company. Can they also learn along with you? Is that there? Or like they're strictly against it? Like if someone says, say engineering should not talk to customers, then that's a big no. So if they're willing to learn and willing to slowly do the demos and follow you, that works.
I think one big red flag for me with any sort of developers is when they come and say, hey, I'm very particular about working on this one particular programming language or this particular framework or this, like anyone who has some very specific opinions about the tech stack or very sort of preconceived biases, they're probably not great as early hires. Maybe later when you're at scale and you need like experts, specialists as opposed to generalists, sure. But early on, you would want someone who's like, hey, I'll pick up any language, in a matter of a week, if that turns out to be the best sort of solution to our problem, right? We used to do this in Primaseller very religiously, is that every developer, in fact, every employee that that joined us, the first couple of weeks was we wouldn't let them do what they were hired for, right? We would just tell them, hey, go use Primaseller and tell me what the product is, right? Because we knew we were never going to be users of our own product, right? So we would literally sort of construct a persona for them and say that, if you had this business, now how would you use Primaseller, right? And at the end of the day, at the end of the week or 2 weeks, they would have to actually sort of do a sales pitch to the rest of the team, right? So and sell Primaseller to us. And we would sort of see, hey, is that person capable of selling Primaseller back to us, right? And that sort of actually, and in between also sort of get them, a couple of times a week, make them sit on customer demos, just to get a sense of what customers want, what retail customers are, right? People who run retail businesses. And one thing that we realized, and especially with programmers, was the ones that were able to sell Primaseller to us effectively, maybe 70% of the way, where I would actually say, hey, you know what, I'll pay that whatever $100 a month and get this product. They actually turned out to be really good developers, right? Really good productive developers, right? They might not have been the best programmers, but they actually moved the needle really fast for us and really far for us. They would, I wouldn't need to sort of break down a feature into sort of modules and classes for them. I would just sort of say, hey, we need to build this feature out, and they would go figure it out, right? In a week, they would come back with some working version of it. I think that's super important. And the sooner you figure it out, if you can figure that out during the interview, and I still haven't figured out how to sort of estimate and gauge that during an interview. If you figure that during an interview, that's one great way to sort of hire. That's one great attribute that you want out of a developer.
Are there like specific incentives that really resonate with a developer? Like, I know, Subbu, you were talking about, man, if there are free drinks, I'll be at an event. But is there, especially at the lower, I mean, maybe it's just a strong generalization, but at different levels, like the CTO, you said, Hari, like, hey, what's the massive problem you're solving?
Yeah.
But, and I get the baseline, right? The baseline is hey, can you pay for my roti kapda makan? Can you take care of that and put value on my skill? But what are they most excited about, I guess, on the day-to-day, or just, I guess, from a culture standpoint?
It differs, and when I have the current team I'm looking at, there are some set of folks who are looking at end-to-end ownership and looking forward to talking to customers, and they want to build what we call they want to own the entire workflow in the product. And so this particular tab in the product or this particular persona, you own that persona, and you decide on all of that. The ownership comes up as something which some folks look forward to. There's the other set of folks who look forward for, like, I don't want to deal with people. I want to deal with code and service, and I just manage them, and I want to go deep dive into it. And even, like, for example, folks whom we hire from open source is like, what code of ours can be open source? Like, how do we make that more exciting and make it meaningful and useful for others? Because they have contributed to open source, they've joined us, and they want to still continue that contribution. Or being even working with the company, how can I contribute to some of the other open source projects? So everyone has this unique their motivation, and it's sort of hard to generalize, like, or if I have to again, the company swags always gets people excited, and whatever level it is, and it just works to some extent. But the day-to-day activities, and when you're really going through that, I think either the product ownership or the tech ownership, and then a third one could be their brand. Like, how do they become it's while I said open source, even them writing in different forums and their blogs gets published, or they are giving a tech talk somewhere else, and the company is going to help you, give you budget for this, and or you can go ahead and talk anywhere about our own technology, like how we solve this problem, and that makes them feel special. So people have these different things, and these also can evolve. So as you work with them, and the manager is like keeps looking out for this, and like, oh, looks like you have an inclination to this, why don't you just go and do this? Like, and these things helps in saying, oh, we have a culture where we allow anyone to do this. That probably makes it better, and developers generally like the transparency part. So how the company is performing, how do we measure the success of the company? Boil it down to simple math for them, like a formula saying, here is our sales number, this is the growth percentage. We had to teach our developers all the metrics, like your ARR and retention rate and gross and net retention rate and so on. And then they understand these metrics, like, oh, this is what you're doing. It's eventually a formula and Excel sheet, and this is what a CFO is doing. So being that transparent with math and formulas also has worked well for us.
Well said.
Yeah, totally agree on that. The transparency part is something that time and again developers have said, right? I mean, they're okay knowing that. I mean, most developers know what they're signing up for in a startup, right? Especially early stage, right? I think what they really look for is that, hey, even if things are going bad, let us know. It's okay. I mean, we won't. Not telling us and then sort of dropping the axe is what has always sort of scared developers, right?
Is that common though?
Yeah, and in my experience, I think most developers have sort of, and I probably dropped that ball a couple of times, right? And I was, at least very early on, I was very afraid of sort of saying that, hey, we were hoping to get to these metrics at this point of time, but we haven't, and things are bad, right? But then, when it came out, and then, this developer walked up to me and said, hey, why didn't you tell us earlier, right? If you had told us earlier, we would have just put in that extra hours, and we would have, I don't know if it would have solved the problem or not, but we would have at least tried.
Right.
So I think that really counts, like getting those early employees, and I think it applies to everyone, not just developers. Getting them along on that journey is probably super important, right? That sets sort of the culture. That's one important part of the culture that the longer you are able to retain that sort of culture, the better it is.
Yeah. I'm with you actually. I think we got to look at it more as, hey, here's a community coming together versus your parents that's trying to like shield the kids from all this
Yeah.
noise and anxiety, right? So absolutely. Tell me this on the and Hari, and this is pointed at you, and I think Subbu, you can add as well. Is everybody kind of, are you dog fooding in terms of using the HackerRank tool itself to hire developers, and in terms of like you guys are so ingrained in the space, like you said, like one time you put up a job, you get like, let's say 10,000 resumes, 1,000 resumes, right? Like what are some of the things that all of you are doing as a team to optimize on the hiring itself?
So I mean, except for the intern hire, and somehow it's how it started. Every other role we use our own product for start to end, and in fact,
and it's effective.
It's very effective. It at least adds. I get to go and add more Jira tickets to our product manager saying this didn't work, and adding all those. So for sure, you get to understand the developer persona, and the product moves faster for sure because of using the whole us dog fooding things, right? But there is certainly and you get to empathize with the user, and I used to take like 3 to 4 interviews a day. So using your own product for 4 hours, and there are some weird issues which would not happen in the first 15 minutes, but you sit on the product for an hour and then this pop-up shows up, and I take a screenshot, I record it, and so that my developers can't tell me that, hey, I can't reproduce this, because that's the first reason we all come up with saying it didn't work. Like I used it. How did you get it? Like, I'm showing you a video and here is the video. Are you telling me I made this up, or like what, right? So that made it give better bug reports and whatnot. I think the intern is where, especially because it comes from college, and we were able to identify these open source and other stuff. So we now we actually use it across all roles, but nothing beats better like in product quality, product scale, and even before the so there's the internal channel where even before a customer could tell us, like, we would know that yes, this is there and so on. For sure, helped us a lot in terms of how we built and visualize. And sometimes some of the engineers would go ahead and fix the bugs because it annoyed their interviews. It's like, there's a bunch of things done. You went ahead and fixed this because it troubled me in my interview, and it was embarrassing for me, so I fixed this.
Nice.
It was seeing those happened a lot.
Nice. But are you optimizing outside of the assessments as well? Like, is resume still a thing that's happening at the intern and the lower level, or there are other tools?
It's there. I think it just probably has become at this point a source of links to multiple other places. It's more than your it's hard to trust the resume, but your resume has links to your GitHub profile, your Stack Overflow profile, your HackerRank profile, and all that stuff. So I use it as, like, from here, what are the other sites I can jump onto? In fact, if even it's Twitter and LinkedIn, developers talk about the cool tech stuff they have built or cool tech stuff they're following. So even in social media, you could go and find these like people who just geek out there as well. So for me, do I need a resume? Absolutely yes, for all roles. But do I stop at resume? Maybe not. It just as a solution to, or just a collection of links about the person. And then you go wherever the resume takes you to, and try to make a judgment about the person.
Cool. I have a few more questions, Rajat. Is there something else that you want to?
No, we can move on. I think
we can do that. Okay. We have something along the lines of, yes, we had something on the ChatGPT thing, but obviously, like, that's I feel like it's we should touch upon it a little bit, as much as I'm sure the two of you have played a lot with it. But are you integrating ChatGPT in any way for your current hiring process? Hari, and then maybe Subbu add delivery if there was anything.
I can go on first. One is we are working with OpenAI to see how we can integrate it with the product itself. So forget like the hiring process is one part, but we also want to see how it can help us um, improve the hiring process for most of our customers too, and trying to see what might that look like. In terms of the core, what happened is it's solving prompt coding questions for you, and that is an issue for our customers, and then we figured out what kind of questions it's solving and what kind of questions it's not solving. So what has happened is it's solving the basic programming questions, which anyway developers never liked in the interview. The one common is reverse a linked list or find the binary tree's height and whatnot. The ones you have studied in your algorithms and data structures course, or you're used to solve, and these are the things you would never really use in your everyday job. Those are the ones that's solving easily, and there are standard solutions available. So our recommendation is like, and how we have evolved is some of the custom questions which are themed based on your business. Like it also excites the candidates, because if I get a job, these are the kind of problems I'll solve in the job. Like, so if it's, so how does the problem connect with your business problems? And we have also tried to avoid these multiple choice questions with shorter statements, and these things are the ones where it's able to solve. I don't know what's in the roadmap for OpenAI, but things looks very exciting. Like for sure, they've changed the trajectory of not just the hiring process, right? Even people are saying, okay, will it ever crack an IIT JEE exam, or will it solve a SAT and so on? So I think most of these assessments have to become more real world, rather than just checking the bookish stuff. And then the hiring process matches your role, and that's hard for a ChatGPT at this point to solve. Because then if ChatGPT can solve that, you would not need the developers. Like you just buy ChatGPT and ask to build a code. That's not possible yet, and so you do need the developer, so the hiring process needs to be tweaked. We went through, figured out that there are some of these questions which are simple and straightforward, had to modify that, and had to get it closer to the role, and now we see that it's not straightforward giving the answers.
Interesting. So anything on the
I think no, we used to, like, when ChatGPT came out, and this was not very long ago, right? A few months ago, a couple of colleagues realized that ChatGPT was way better at writing JDs than they could, right? So writing JDs was something that all of us used to hate, right? Because eventually it would end up into like copy pasting something from somewhere else, and invariably you would sort of not correctly edit something, and then somebody would come yelling saying, hey, how can you give me such a shitty JD, right? So we realized that if we just chucked in the basic requirements that we would have literally told the recruitment team, it was spitting out like 90% accurate JDs, right? So we used to use that. That's as far as I use ChatGPT. But it's interesting. So I've been sort of fiddling around with it, trying to see what it can do. It's interesting, right? I fully don't know what else it can be used for. I did try getting it to write some code and stuff. It was interesting. A lot of what I tried, it actually gave me legit code. Right? It was. It wasn't outlandish cult code from some 20 repositories. Right? It seemed very legit, and a couple of them I tried compiling and running them, it actually ran right, as expected. So that's interesting. I don't know, but for sure there is a ton of stuff that's going to come out around using AI for this. But so far, I think largely I've just relied on natural intelligence more than anything else for hiring.
Do you feel like it's possible to hire someone like what's the next, like I feel like you have a lot of these assessments, right? And I think they're pretty good on the tangible skill level. And I think I was talking to somebody today, and they were talking about they hired a marketing person, and then a month later they've realized, man, this person's not a good culture fit, right? Or it's an work ethic fit, right? Not a good work ethic fit. It's not a good culture fit where, oh, we need someone to get their hands dirty, but they are let's say not willing to, or the pace at which they work. Let's say startup is, hey, I need fifth gear, you're at the third gear, right? So how do I, and I feel like the future may not even be assessments. Like today it's still tests, right? It's like you ask me a question, I answer it. Like, is there a way to test for those things? I mean, if you had to if there was a white canvas in the future, how would I test for something which is like this? And at really rapid speeds. Is there an AI play at all for testing things like this in the future?
And why do you guys think about that? I've always felt with these sort of things, it's more a problem definition gap, right? Like when you're trying to, like, how do you define culture fit and then start figuring out how you're going to assess?
Yeah, if there is we did this for the first X engineers, and I don't think it's scalable anymore, and not sure. But so and this is way back when we just started. So me and Vivek, we were in an apartment, and so it was like a 2 BHK, and because we had we were usually getting students and hiring for junior roles, we'd ask them to come home for like Friday and leave on Monday. So there was no interview. So we used to give them a task and saying, can you build this? And it was a side project kind of a thing. But the interviews actually happened during lunch like walk out for a lunch. Here is a nice place, and we would just talk and so on. I don't think it's still possible. And now it's even more harder to have someone spend 2 days to hire that. But if there is a white canvas, it's just that, like, can you work with the person? There are signals you can get, like, are they annoyed by slowness? Usually, what sort of annoys them?
It's a good one.
And if they're annoyed by slowness, then they are going to push you and so on. There is and again, because it's about, there are things, the ownership, velocity, all of that fits in well. You could ask a bunch of questions without directly making it an interview. Like in fact, I think Vivek used to use this, like I think he read this in a book, like what is it that as a child you enjoyed the most? Like when you're at a younger age, what is it that you enjoyed the most, and so on. And you can take different answers. For example, I, for whatever reason, like a whole lot of math and math Olympiad and other stuff. And my dad was a math teacher, so that also aligned along with that. And then he's like, oh, that's why you're data driven. Like you like numbers because of this, and this is where your analytic thing comes from. So you could ask these as this ends up being an icebreaker question, but he does get a lot more from this particular question to get a sense of where they are from. And all of these are based on some of the early incidences or the first company we worked. If it's about velocity, then you take that forever. And if the first company is about stability, or because you can't always think about velocity in a healthcare industry, or right. If you're writing software for, let's say, airplanes, you better write it like right rather than multiple iterations. So those things gets you some picture on what matters for them. Is it velocity, or and there is no right or wrong answer here, but whether based on the answer, does it fit your company's culture? So for me, I think the more time you spend is probably the only way you're able to get to the stage. Beyond that, I haven't found a magic solution for this. Subbu, anything you have?
No, I agree, because the more I mean, for example, I still write code today, right? But if you were to ask me what this particular API in Java looks like, I have no idea. I don't. I mean, my IDE tells me, I Google it, right? Maybe the thing that from a technical standpoint, you really sort of want to evaluate is something which is like a 10,000 foot answer, right? Or a problem, right? So you give a situation and say, hey, what is sort of the overall architecture that you would use or something of that sort, right? But I think beyond that, what really matters, and I think this is where maybe AI, and you need to figure that out, is to sort of find out these behavioral aspects of like, hey, what's your work ethic? Like Hari said, hey, do you like stability? Do you like velocity? But without asking leading questions like on a standard 5-point scale, saying that, hey, I somewhat agree, I somewhat disagree, sort of thing. But hey, if I were to give you a prompt and you said something, can I infer whether you liked stability versus velocity, right? I mean, till a few years ago, it was probably possible to look at a resume and see the companies that people worked at before they showed up for your interview and figure out whether they would prefer stability or velocity. But I think in today's world where the average stint that you see is like whatever, 12 months, 18 months, 24 if you're lucky, I don't think that's long enough for someone to sort of, for any developer or any other function to sort of get ingrained into the culture of a company. Right? I think 100%. It still takes a few years of working to get that culture, right? So then the question sort of becomes, what is inherently that person, right? And for the longest time, I used to, and I hate saying this, that it sounds elitist, but I used to look at what rank did they get in some AIEEE or JEE, right? And it wasn't because they got that rank, right? It showed me that they were just capable of slogging it out.
Right.
Like they would just close their eyes and just do. Sometimes average smartness with a lot of hard work can get you amazing results, right? So I would look for these sort of patterns rather than it really didn't matter whether they went to IIT or not, right? What mattered to me was, hey, is there something in your resume that shows me that you're capable of just shutting out everything else and slogging, right? And pushing through whatever it is, right? So I think those are the things that you sort of need to start looking for, saying, how do I judge this? And it doesn't really come across very easily in a 1-hour conversation. Right?
100%.
But to the extent that now a lot of people know that the question that you're asking is sort of designed to elicit this sort of information, so they tailor their answers to that. Right?
Which is why I think this whole velocity versus stability thing, I think is such a beautiful way to ask the question, because like Hari said, there is no right answer. Because if you ask someone, are you data driven, whether they're data driven or not, they know saying they are data driven is a positive answer. But I think when you put it as two diverging paths and say, like, both these are positive traits. Stability is a great trait. Velocity is a great trait. Now, what would you sacrifice for the other? I think that adds so much value.
Right.
I think it's just trade-offs, right? How does someone think about trade-offs?
So true.
Actually, I think the tangible skill is down. I mean, I feel like if we could figure a way out to assess the intangibles, I would love to get them to play a sport for like 30 minutes. Pick your favorite sport.
Man, everyone doesn't play sport. I think
no, it does. It can, but even if it's chess, right? Like,
right.
I mean, if they could play, let's say the sport is the language, but if they could play the same sport that I play, I feel like, let's take basketball. It's amazing how you can get to know about someone in an accelerated way in like a 30-minute time frame of seeing them how they play, whether it's effort, whether it's how they respond to a loss, how competitive they are. All of that kicks in, and it doesn't have. I mean, obviously, you're right. I'm not going to be like, dude, you don't want to play basketball. Come play basketball in the morning.
No, but I think to that point, for the longest time, at least when I was much younger, I used to think all these stupid games that you would have at these company offsites, I would find them really irritating.
Ridiculous.
And I would
I
say,
agree.
hey, can we just skip this and get to the beer, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what really mattered. But I mean, later in life, the last couple of years when, we did a couple of these offsites and, these large team dinners or, team outings, is when I sort of realized that these things actually, they actually make a difference in that bonding, right? And when you are standing outside and watching this group sort of split into teams and try to, I don't know, pass balls around or whatever, you start realizing, hey, who's a team player, who's not, who's smart enough to hack it quickly and try to figure out, who automatically sort of assumes that role of leading and bringing people along versus who is a loner and he says, hey, you guys go away. I know the best solution to this. It's very interesting, right? When you're sitting outside and watching some of these, and I participated in some, I watched some, and I could actually see the difference, and I came back and I was talking to, my HR folks, and I was like, hey, today was like a eye opener for me that, doing these silly team activities, as silly as they might seem, it actually sort of brings out certain aspects. And, I was later able to sort of correlate it to the way these people worked professionally as well. So I think that's useful. But again, to Ajay's point, you can't expect everyone to play basketball.
Yeah. No, but I also feel you're not different people in different scenarios, just lesser of yourself in different scenarios, right?
Yeah.
And I think sports, in some sense, or anything which puts you in a state of flow, will bring out your most natural instincts. So
yeah, I think you want to put people, like, if we could put anyone in a position where they have flow, where they have comfort, I think it would be your ideal icebreaker evaluation.
Yeah, I think I've heard, I've not tried this, I've heard this, like, where one is they would ask someone from the company to play ping pong in the lowest level. So it's almost like, I've never played TT, is like, I've never done this. How comfortable are you jumping into this? And the person on the other side is a good player, but playing at a much, much lower level. And slowly they keep increasing the level to see like how you react when things get a little uncomfortable, because it always happens in work. Like you're used to doing in this and you got to go there. And then the person finally sees where you give up, how do you handle like when you're not able to do, and so on. If you are not a remote company, I think that works. The other thing which I've also seen is, rather than a meeting room, just take them out for a walk works a lot, Wave. Like it's so much, it's the same time, not any extra effort. But if you have a good trail to walk and you just walk with them, somehow gets that reduces the friction and gets the original personality out. And that's what you want to hear from them, to see if it's the right fit. And as much as also tell them that they're also evaluating the company. Like they should also see the right fit works in their benefit as well, not just for the company.
So true.
Because they are also going to suffer if the company is not the right fit for them. So I think these things, tricks have worked well in getting the true personality out.
I think one big red flag for me for any interview, doesn't matter how junior or senior is, I always sort of leave 10 minutes or 15 minutes at the end. And I say, hey, do you have any questions for me?
Right.
The ones that say that, hey, I have no questions for you, that's a big red flag, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Because even if all the basic stuff of like salary and I don't know, policy and
question.
whatever,
You're just not asking.
If you have that, I just feel like even if you know the answers to that, it's perfectly okay. Like for example, I actually haven't interviewed anywhere since I started Primaseller, right? I've not really been on the other side of the table, right? But whenever sort of anything that has closely resembled an interview and someone says, hey, I'm done with my questions, I always sort of say that, hey, do you mind if I spend some time asking you some questions? And I think one question that has always been sort of a great way to start a conversation, even if I have no context, is I would say, hey, what does your average week or average day look like? Right? And invariably they'll say something, and then you can dig in and find out and see if that culture really matches. Right? And people who ask me that question saying, hey, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Right? I just feel like they probably are a lot more curious about how stuff works around them than sort of being told instructions and then just sort of executing on them.
Also, maybe more realistic about their approach to work, right?
Yeah.
And with you, like I think the quality of a person's skill set also you can very clearly get to know through the question that they ask. Like, I mean, I can speak about marketing essentially or sales, but if you're asking more business focused questions, I think that's a huge plus, right? Like, like, how's the business doing? Like, do we have a runway? Like, how do you think about whatever? Like something very specific. But if, to your point, if they hold back and become very like inward, sometimes I can be like, okay, maybe this person is not necessarily. I mean, they're a good fit today, but have they evolved to that position? Not sure yet. So. Sweet. I think we can wrap up here. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I know, by the way, before we start, Subbu had feedback line on your podcast like really long.
Really long. I think it's the longest one we've done.
Yeah. We're going to make a collection of just all Subbu's recording and be like, dude, this is 20 minutes of just you talking.
Yeah. By the way, this is the first time I've been on a podcast. So.
Okay.
Amazing.
That's cool. Thank you.
It was good. I mean, I sort of had, I didn't know what I would be asked. And, I have a problem with being recorded. I know this gets edited. So hopefully Ani and Ajay will remove all the stupid things that I said.
We can't edit the words that come out of your mouth.
AI hasn't got there yet. So maybe that's the next problem.
It is, by the way, recently on Instagram.
Yeah, super.
So random, sorry. Recently I saw this on Instagram where there's this lady, let's say she's speaking a dialogue from a movie with a lot of expletives. And then the AI essentially removes the expletives and replaces it with freaking, changes it into Japanese, changes it. I was like, wow, like from an editing standpoint, yes, removing someone, right? So we'll try that with you, Subbu, if that works.
Sounds good, man.
Cool.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks,
Hari.
Thank you
Thanks
so much.
Thank you. Thanks
Enjoy
for
the
having
weekend.
us.
We'll chat soon.
Thank you.